Well, good afternoon, folks. I want to welcome all of you here today who are watching our podcast. We are delighted that you are here. My guest today is Miss Marlene Howell, and Miss Marlene is coming to share her testimony about what the Lord has done in her life, about the hope and freedom that she found in Jesus Christ after many years of addiction. And so, Miss Marlene, we welcome you here today. I do. I'm grateful that you took time to be here with us. We have a couple of folks here in our studio audience, and that's always a delight and kind of gives it a more comfortable feeling, and so glad y'all are here as well. So Miss Marlene, just if you would, you just start where the Lord would have you start with your story about where you were and where you came from in terms of spiritually and what was going on in your life and where you're at today.
Well, you know, the first thing I always say is that this testimony is not about me, it's about God. God is the one that did it. He gets the glory. He changed me. And you know, I grew up in church. My mom and dad, they did everything they could to give us what we needed to be successful, productive adults. And they took us to church, taught us right from wrong. They gave us everything that we needed. And my mom worked nights at the hospital and my dad worked on the road. So I had a lot of responsibility and a lot of freedom.
He was a truck driver?
No, he was a millwright.
Okay.
And my mom was a nurse at the hospital at night. She hadn't been out of college long. And I had two younger brothers, and my dad, when I was about 12, decided that he was going to start working at home. And instead of being grateful, one, that they trusted me to do all those things, but that now he was there to take it off my plate, I became resentful and rebellious. And you know, 1 Samuel 15:23 says that rebellion is the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is iniquity and idolatry. And I just became so rebellious that I was an idol to myself. That's all I cared about. I cared about myself. I cared about feeling better. I didn't care about anybody else's feelings. And I was always an overweight and kind of awkward child, and my brothers were always very popular. And I just had this insatiable desire just to fit in, and I never could find my place. And a girl moved in down the street from us, and she was extremely popular. And I was about 12, and I'm not even sure how we got our hands on it, but I smoked marijuana with her the first time. And I believe she'd have stayed my friend, even had I not done it. But you know, I didn't have the coping skills to say no and get myself out of situations that I might have been uncomfortable in. So, you know, it was just an every now and again thing, and it just progressed. It got worse and worse and worse. And when I was 14, my mom started going to Hemp Hill. And and Mike Smith was the pastor then. And we were part of a drama group. They had a drama group. And they asked me to join the drama group. And my mom went to Eric and said, you know, I want you to know that these are the things she does. She lies, she steals, she cheats, she smokes, she drinks alcohol. She does all these things.
You did that?
Yes. And he said, you know, Miss Donna, we just take them and we let the Lord work out the rest. So we went all over traveling. We went to the Renaissance home, we went to churches, we went everywhere witnessing, and I was lost as a goose, just as lost as could be. And we were at Big Hammock Baptist Church one night doing a skit, and I just couldn't even, I was standing up on stage and I couldn't even catch my breath. It was like, it was just, everything was so heavy. I just couldn't even catch my breath, and I walked off the stage and I got down on my hands and knees and I just prayed and I said, God, I know I'm a sinner and I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to be pleasing to you. And I asked God to save me, and He did. And when I stood up, it was just like all this weight was gone. But you know, the problem was I made that drama group my foundation, not Jesus's teachings, not the solid rock. I made that drama group my foundation, and we ended up leaving that church. And when we did, my foundation just fell apart. And I went right back to doing the same things that I was doing. And you know, people all the time say, well, there's no way that you were saved and you did drugs. Well, I'm here to tell you, there is. If you don't have that foundation, and you don't, you know, it's like, it always reminds me of in Matthew and 12, I think it's 43 and 45, where it talks about the unclean spirit leaving his home and going out into the dry places and trying to find rest, and he could find none. So he goes back to his home, but he can't enter because the man's cleaned up his home. Well, he goes and he gets 7 more spirits, more evil than he is, and when he comes back, the man is worse off than he was before. Well, when you stop doing drugs, there's a void, and you have to fill that void with Jesus, with a love for God. If you don't, you're an easy target for Satan. He's going to come right back and move in, and if he can't do it on his own, he's going to get friends to help. And that was where my problem came. You know, I like to say, well, I don't know why I relapsed, but that was why. Because I never filled the void with Jesus. I always just went along with what the world said I needed to do. And, you know, the first time I was ever arrested, I was booked 52 times, and it was for theft, forgery, identity theft, burglary, because, you know, I did those things to support my habit. And, of course, they sent me to, instead of putting me in prison, they sent me to treatment for 30 days, which is nothing. It does nothing. It's secular. You know, AA was written on biblical principles, but along the line, they took God out. There's no God, there's no Jesus in a recovery program. There's just not. So I went and I ended up going to a halfway house, and I did okay for a little while because there again, I found a group that I fit in with. But you know, those meetings were not enough. Going to classes were not enough. So I relapsed again. And I came home, and of course my mom, who is an enabler, always trying to fix something she didn't break, got me a lawyer, a very good attorney, and they put me in drug court. And I did good in drug court for a couple of years because there again, there was a group that I fit in with. And I was in and out of jail, and they finally called me in and had a staff meeting with me, and the judge said, you know, you've been to every treatment program, every class, everything that we could do for you, we've done. And he said, you could facilitate a drug court group on your own. There's nothing else we can do for you. And I just assumed that day that there was really nothing else that could be done for me, that I would probably die a drug addict. And I got arrested again in 2011, and I went to see my attorney, and he told me that I was looking at 10 years minimum, that I was a habitual offender, and that I would go to prison for 10 years. And I left his office, and he called my mom, and he said, Donna, you need to find Marlene because I'm worried she won't make it through the day. And I'm sitting in a camper on my parents' property because if I was in that camper, they knew I was alive. And I was contemplating taking my own life because I was just hopeless. There was just nothing else left for me. I thought I would die a drug addict. And it was like I audibly heard the Holy Spirit say, get up and go in that house and tell your mama you'll do whatever she wants. So I got up and I went in there, and I just barged through her door. And I said, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I can't live like this. I'm going to die. And she said, well, I'm calling Bill Blackman. So she called Brother Bill, and he told her about a place called Freedom. And it's a faith-based treatment center in Logansport.
Over near Manny?
Logansport.
Logansport.
Yeah. And it is solely run on donations. The state cannot interfere with what's being taught. Brother Wayne teaches what needs to be taught. They cannot tell him anything that he can do. And I'm sitting on the side of the road in front of this old rundown schoolhouse thinking, what have I got myself in? My mom and dad are about to leave me here for a year. This place looks like the windows are going to fall in.
It's not a holiday resort.
No, it is meant to humble you,
Right.
and it does. It does. It humbles you. And, you know, when I was there, I didn't fight the program. I didn't fight the rules, but I fought the teaching. I was just there to get out of trouble. So I was there about 11 months, and Brother Wayne called me in the chapel, and he said, listen, we talked to the judge, and he's going to take the 10 years off the table. They're going to give you probation. So I went to court, and they gave me probation, and I came back, and I self-sabotaged, and I left the program.
You walked away from there?
I walked away from the program. And I lasted, I don't know, probably 2 months, and there again, I didn't fill that void with Jesus, and I didn't heed to the teachings that I received at Freedom. So I leave there, and my dad says, you know, you can't stay here. You didn't finish the program. So I went to Monroe. Excuse me. I went to Monroe to a sober living home, which I think are some of the worst things you can
Are
do.
they secular based?
Yes, they're secular based. And you live there with what is called a house mother. And she's in the program too. You know, and you all have all these destructive behaviors because basically all you've done is stop using drugs. You haven't changed anything. So I did good there for about 6 months because there again, I fit in with those people. And I met a man who lived in the men's sober living home, and we started using together, and I had a child. And I didn't think I could have children. I was 36 years old when I had him. And I stayed sober the whole time I was pregnant because I did not want to lose this child. And I really thought that I could continue to stay sober for his life. And I stayed sober for about 3 months after he was born. I left his father because he continued to use, and then within a month I relapsed. And I took this baby everywhere with me, just like a security blanket. I took him with me when I bought drugs. I took him with me when I used drugs. He was with me when I drove high. He was with me all the time. And I thought, oh, I'm doing so good because I don't leave my kid. I don't leave my kid for days at a time. My mom and daddy don't watch my kid. But I was putting him in places and situations he had no business being in. He was a toddler. And I got arrested again. And I went back to Freedom. And there again, I followed the rules, but I fought the program. And I stayed right until the very end, and then I self-sabotaged and I walked away again. And I came home and I stayed sober for 3 or 4 months. And my son's father was living in Oklahoma, and I packed our things in the middle of the night and we went to Oklahoma. And I was there for a few months, and it was horrible. We were both using. He was in a psychosis. It was just so bad. And I had my child there and thought I was doing good because I didn't leave him with my parents. And I had a warrant that came up here, and my mom called and she said, listen, we know what's going on up there, and you need to let us come get Levi. So they came and got him. Now, mind you, I have a brother that my parents adopted that is 5 months older than my child. They're 12 now, the both of them. But my parents had 2 2-year-olds at one time in their 60s. There's no reason they should have had those children together. I should have been there helping them with my brother. But instead, they're raising my
Did your
child.
folks ever just give up on you?
Well, that's what comes next, because, you know, when I had a child, my mama finally had to choose between me or that baby, and she chose that baby. She wouldn't even give me a cigarette. She wasn't giving me anything. And, you know, I tell people all the time, I'm like, it's the hardest thing you will ever do. But if you enable your child, you are enabling them and helping them not only destroy their lives, but the ultimate end is going to be an end date. And you will help them find that end date. It's hard to be tough on your children, but you have to do it. You have to. And you know, my dad used to say all the time, he's like, I just don't know where we went wrong. And I'm like, look, I'm grown. I make my own bad decisions. Y'all did what you were supposed to do. I made these decisions. There was something missing in me. It's not anything you did. And you know, my mom said to me one day, she said, I understand that. I understand what you're saying, but God did not give you to me for you to be a drug addict. And I played a part in it by enabling you. And I knew then that my train had probably hit the end of the tracks. When she figured that out, I knew then that we'd probably come to the end of the road and that she was not going to do this with me much longer. And I ended up, we came home. Things got so bad in Oklahoma, we came home. And I had stitches because my son's father had stabbed me. I was on crutches. I had 2 black eyes, and my nose was split right here. And I rode home with a screwdriver, prepared to stab this man the next time he put his hands on me. And the whole way home, I'm thinking, what are you doing? You're gonna die. You're going to die, and your mama's not going to know what happened to you, and your baby is not going to have a parent, not one parent. And he's going to be raised by his grandparents, and you'll miss all that. Well, I came home, and of course, I was in Louisiana maybe 18 hours before my mama and my best friend get together, and they decide they're going to do something about it. So they called a detective, Will George, who was like my personal detective the whole time I was in addiction. If I did it, Will was going to figure it out.
That's Brother Danny's son?
Yes. Yeah, Will was going to figure it out, and he was going to come get me one way or another. So they called Will and told him where I was at, and they came and got me and took me to jail. And it was the best thing both of them ever did for me. So I stayed in jail about 44 days, which is a drop in the bucket because Brother Wayne was not willing to let me come back to the program. But my mother is persistent, and he let me come back. And I went back that time with the intention that I was going to get sober one way or another, no matter what, because my child needed a good parent, and I was going to be that parent. But that's all I was getting, was sober. And, a lot of people in their addiction, they fixate on God. But I didn't. I was one of those. I'm like, don't talk to me about the Lord. I know what I'm doing is wrong. I don't want to hear it. So we're sitting in class, and we're doing a positional identity disorder class, which, my position is in heaven, but my condition on earth doesn't match my position. And he asked me to read Galatians 2:20, which says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. And it's like a light bulb went off, and I'm like, my identity is in Jesus, not addiction. That is not what defines me. Jesus Christ defines me. And I knew that day I would never use drugs again. And, I went through the program, I graduated, I came home, I went to college, I graduated from college, I'm going back to get my master's because what I went to college for is so not what the Lord has called me to do.
Where did you go to school at?
I went to Northwestern.
Okay.
Right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And I graduated with a bachelor's in addiction studies, but that's not what the Lord wants me to do. And my heart is with children of addicts and alcoholics. That's where my heart lies. So I'm going to go back and get my master's in social work, and I would like to have a private practice that worked with adolescents and youth who are either high risk or their parents are addicts or alcoholics.
Well, you'll stay very busy.
Yes, because it's rampant, it's everywhere. And God has done so many. He's restored my relationships. I had a brother that didn't speak to me for 10 years. He could act like, I could be in the room and he'd just act like I wasn't there. And we were sitting on our porch about a year after I came home, and he said, 10 years ago, if you'd have died, I'd have been okay. He said, because it had been over for us and it had been over for you. He said, but today I don't know what I'd do without you. And I wasn't allowed to be around his children. Today I have a checkbook. I have a credit card for his children. I homeschool one of his children. The other one, on most days, I'm one of her favorite people. But God has just restored so many things that I thought were a lost cause. There's a store out where we live that I was banned from. I couldn't even go in the parking lot because I stole from there. And for 3 years after I came home, I worked in that store. The store's closed down, but I still have the key. It's just a reminder of what God can do. And I've had the ability to not make amends, but to sincerely apologize to people that I hurt, people that I stole from, people that I lied to. And God has just given me such a support group, even in those people alone, that have just rallied around me and continue to support me through my recovery. Well, not recovery, because I was delivered. But when you explain it to most people, you have to say recovery, but I'm recovered. I don't do a treatment program. I don't go to classes. I don't do anything. I'm active in my church. I fill my life with God's word and a love for God. And those kids continue to hold me accountable. Those kids are very, very important and special to me. And they know my past. I don't hide it. I want them to know the dangers of drugs and alcohol. We were going to the crusade in Leesville, and one of them made a joke about a beer. And I said, oh, hold on, I just want y'all to know this. I said, because I mean this with my whole heart. If you ever decide that's the route you want to go, I will come find you and I will bring you home no matter where you're at. And I promise you that those people won't ever want to do drugs with you again. And they're all like, well, we're not doing drugs. We're not doing drugs. I'm like, alcoholism is nothing to joke about. And one of them said, well, what if I'm on a boat in the middle of the ocean? I said, then I'll charter a boat and I'll come get you, but you just better be ready. But those kids know that there's nothing that they can do that I probably haven't already done and that I would judge them for. And they're just very, very special to me. I wouldn't trade those kids for anything. And they challenge me daily with the Word of God. Some of the questions they ask, I'm like, well, I don't know, but I'll try to find out. And if I can't figure it out, we'll go to Brother Eugene and we'll let him figure it out.
It really resonates with me. We were talking before the broadcast that deliverance versus recovery, because it's not a criticism, it's just an observation that recovery is the wrong word.
It is.
Jesus never came to recover anybody from,
No.
he came to deliver people. And so that's always been a struggle I've had, like we were talking about the 12-step programs. There's a lot of self-effort in that, a lot of self-recovery or whatever. I just always had a problem with that. And I don't believe personally that if you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic,
No,
or that you have to be.
definitely not. And that's the world. The world wants you to believe that. And listen, this is another thing that people just kind of fail to realize. But treatment programs are a moneymaker. It's a business. Halfway houses are a business. There's some kind of financial benefit to that.
Oh.
So if you're a repeat offender, then they're always going to be in business. And that was one of the things that made me decide that I did not want to work in the addiction field. Now, it will benefit me when I have my own practice, because when I have my own practice, I can draw from that, but it's not going to be something where I have to follow the rules of the addiction world or the recovery world and teach these kids that your mom and dad are always going to be drug addicts and alcoholics, even if they're sober. Or if you tend to go down that path, there's no hope for you. You will always be an addict or an alcoholic. And it just takes people's hope. And that's what Jesus is about. Without Jesus, we have no hope. So that world, I always try to remind myself that it's a business and they make money from it. It's just like a hospital.
Miss Marlene, the government, our local governments received millions of dollars in these pharmaceutical settlements, the opioid settlements. Our parish here in Rapides Parish, I forgot, I looked it up, how many millions of dollars they got back. A portion of that, a good portion of that, is supposed to be filtered back out to drug treatment centers or rehab centers. And I have found it I've tried to get some access to that. I know Bodine and I talked about that from Glenmore. A lot of that money goes to secular programs that is given out, and it's sometimes difficult, it seems, for faith-based people to, and I don't know that it would be good to get it. There might be strings, so many strings attached to it that it wouldn't be, but there's tons of money out there available for people to start halfway houses, things like that will help people kind of get back on their feet and get started.
Well, and it's misappropriated to the wrong places. You know, and we used to have several halfway houses in Pineville and Alexandria. There was a detox. None of those exist anymore because it's just a breeding ground for relapse. You go there, this is one of the things, like my kids all the time, like when I worked at the store, my boss's daughter, she came in one day. She's like, my boyfriend doesn't believe you ever did drugs. And I'm like, well? And she's like, well, I don't know why I don't believe that. You said it. And I said, because that's not what you see when you look at me. God changed everything about me. He didn't just make me stop using drugs. He changed everything about me. The way I talk, the people I'm okay being around, the way I think, what I believe, what I will put up with, my service, he changed everything.
So you had to eliminate some people out of your life?
Oh, yes. When I first came home, I drove. This is how good God is. I used in the community that I lived in, and it is very hard to go back to the place where you did all those things. Well, I prayed the whole time I was at the mission. Now, mind you, I was there 18 months, and I prayed that God would protect me from those people. And for 6 months, and I live 4 miles from the Huntston Dollar Store, I drove to Simpson to go to the dollar store just to avoid anybody. You know, I didn't even want to take my kids to the library in Huntston because I was worried about that. To this day, which I've been home for, how long have I been home? Since 2019. Since I've been home, I've seen one person that I used with, and she's no longer here.
Mm.
You know.
So another thing that comes to my mind, I want to ask Levi's dad.
I have no idea where he's at.
Do you know if he ever got out of that or not?
No. I did hear from him periodically. He would send me these long rants, but it's probably been 8 or 9 months since I've heard anything. And you know, Levi just never mentioned his dad. The last time he saw him, he was 3. He never mentioned him, so I never mentioned him. And one night we're in my room and he's like, you know, my dad's dead. And I'm like, what? He said, my dad, he's dead. I'm like, no, he is not. And he's like, well, I thought he was dead. And I'm like, he's not. And I knew then, you know, he's heard me give my testimony, I don't know, probably 100 times. So I just decided that I was going to be honest with him. And you know, I told him, I said, look, there's not a doubt in my mind that your dad loves you. But the drugs are so much stronger than that love. It's hard for me to even explain to you how strong that pull is.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows, you know, that his dad's an addict. He knows about him stabbing me. He knows that he has a half-brother. But he has no interest in knowing more about him, wanting to see him, wanting to talk to him. And I think a lot of that is the drug use. Mm. If there wasn't the drug use and I just said, you know, well, it didn't work out between us, and I think there would be that curiosity. But for him, the drug use just turns that off. There is no curiosity. And I think that, you know, people say all the time, well, I'm a single mother. Well, I'm not. God's helping me raise my child. God and my parents. You know, my dad, Levi, the other night we were in church, and well, in our Wednesday night class, and I asked for prayer requests, and he said, my dad, and my niece said, who? And he said, my pawpaw. He's like my dad. He helped raise me. He's going to have heart surgery. So, you know, my daddy filled that void. I have brothers that fill that void. And the Lord fills it. That's one of the things I prayed for him, that any void left in his life by his heavenly Father, that God would fill that void.
So important.
It is.
Yeah. Well, just a couple of things before we go. When will you get your licensure?
Well, in November 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with a rare blood cancer, which is not terminal, but there are only 28,000 people in the United States that have it. And I took a year off to take care of my health and get all that settled, and then I started having some heart problems. So I plan to return to Stephen F. Austin in the fall, and then it'll take me 2 years because I can build on the addiction. You know, I don't have to go back and go through a bachelor's for social work. I can go for 2 years and obtain my master's and have my bachelor's.
You have your license and everything.
Yes. Well, then I'll have to, you know, then you have to train, and you have to work under a clinical social worker for so long, and then you have to intern. So it'll be a few years before I'm able to do anything on my own.
Well, I look forward to that happening. There's such a tremendous need. If they'll let you intern here at my church, we'll make that happen. Final thing I want to mention to you, we have people watching, pastors are watching us this evening, and other folks. I think there's so much truth to what you said there a minute ago. Till the train stops, until the train gets to the end of the track, it's very hard to get out of it. So someone tonight that's maybe reached that point, they're ready to jump off the train or it's at the end, what would you say to them? What should they do?
Well, the first thing you have to do is give up what control you think you have, because you have zero. You have no control. It is a lie from Satan. You are not in control at all. And I used to point people towards treatment programs, but somebody in your life who has a pastor. Somebody in your life has a pastor. You need to find that pastor. You need to be 100% honest, and you need to tell him what's going on and let him help you find somewhere to go.
Well, so start with the church.
Yes, start with the church. And this is one of the biggest tools that Satan uses, and he did it to me for years. But addicts and alcoholics, they think, oh, the minute I walk into church, everybody's turned around looking at me. But it's not that way.
Well, they hardly will come to church. I've had
Yes.
funerals for people that are part of that culture and a part of that community, if you want to call it that. They will come and support one another. They'll come to the church, maybe have a meal. They hardly will ever come to church, and I think it's because of that sense that people will look down upon them or judge them or something like that.
It's a stigma.
It's a stigma.
And
honestly, I've been pastoring for 40 years. I'm not a professional counselor. This is not a criticism. It has just been my experience. The most difficult people to work with are addicts.
Oh, 100%.
Because they're deceiving themselves, and then everything they tell you most of the time is a deception. And so it's a big struggle. It's a big struggle for me. That's not my gift and my calling, but I'm burdened, especially in my community here. There's such a tremendous need to try to help people. We've tried to do some of that. It's been kind of a helpless feeling. And again, I've had some of the same feelings that you've expressed about 12-step programs. I'm not interested in doing that. I have heard a lot of success stories come out of Freedom Mission over at Logansport. So there are some things out there. Teen Challenge up at, they have a place up near Winfield. They've been very, very successful. I've had them in my church. But anyway, a lot of questions, a lot of things we could talk about. And I appreciate so much your testimony.
Thank you.
Very powerful, and I think it'll be of a great help to someone. And like I said, get licensed as quick as you can. And you'll be busy all the time. But thank you so much for coming, and,
Thank you for
and I hope
having
you'll
me.
come back sometime and
Absolutely.
let us know how things are going. And how old is Levi?
He's 12.
So that's what grade?
He's in 6th. He'll go to 7th. And my baby's growing up. And him and my brother, I live with my parents. My dad's 70. My mom is in her late 60s.
I thought you lived in LeCamp, but you live.
I live in Heinston. Well, I'm on the Vernon Parish line.
Okay.
And I live with my parents, and I help take care of my little brother. So, one of the things that bothered me about my child was that he would be an only child. And I had 2 brothers growing up, and I loved having siblings. And it bothered me that he would be an only child. And then my mom and dad had the opportunity to adopt my little brother. So they got him when he was 9 months old. So Levi and Emmanuel have been together their whole lives. Now, they fight, and they get on each other's nerves, but no matter what, they will have each other. And that is just another prayer that God answered, because I was not going to have another child. And God answered that prayer by giving us Emmanuel. And he is more like my dad than any of his biological children.
Do you speak a lot?
I do.
You do. Churches?
I do. I go with Brother Wayne some, but people don't realize, they're like, oh, I heard your testimony. I'm like, no, you didn't. You heard about this much of it, and you heard my testimony about being at Freedom. And I'm like, if you heard my whole testimony, you'd be like, well, that's a whole different story. So I speak with Brother Wayne some, and I speak other places. Brother Danny, I spoke at his church, and they let the kids ask me questions afterward.
Amazing.
And that day, we walked out of there that Sunday morning, and we got to the parking lot, and I was getting in my car, and I stopped, and I turned around, I told my mama, I said, look, the Lord doesn't want me to work in addiction. And she's like, are you sure? I'm like, oh, I'm 100% sure he wants me to work with kids. And she's like, well, if that's what he told you to do, then you better do it. And then I was able to go back and speak at their lock-in to kids I had already spoken to. So it's a blessing to be able to not only address, because I have a heart for mothers and fathers who have addict children, but it's a blessing to be able to interact with those youth and for them to understand that that does not have to be your path, ever. It does not. And the way to stay off of that path is to stay with Jesus. So I do speak quite often.
Great. Well, let me just share with anybody who's watching right now. If you're at the end of the road, if you've come to that point in your life, you're struggling with addiction or struggling with anything that you need help with. I don't have all the answers, but we can start looking for the answers together. Contact me, and you can do that through my church here or through the website where this is going to be posted, and get in contact with me, and I'll do my very best to try to help in any way that I can. Again, thank you very much, Miss Marlene Howell.
Thank you.
From Hineston.
Yes, sir.
And we appreciate you being here and our special guest in the studio audience today. And look forward to having her back and just giving us an update. I'm excited. My mind's going in a lot of different directions about different types of programs, and so there's a lot to be done and a big need. So thank you very much. God bless, and tune in next week for Speaking Truth.